progress.
All right, and Wandan, I think we're ready. Are we gonna go ahead and turn this over to you and get started?
Yeah. All right. So, Elliot, just to confirm, we are doing the ZDX overview first and then going into the service now.
Yeah, I think just a
Yeah.
brief overview of the product.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Let
this is
me.
the first time probably that Brian and Matt have have seen it. It's so probably want to know what they're getting into before they just we show them how it works in their
Yeah.
environment.
All right. So, so one of the things when we were talking about, you did mention about the various different point solutions that you have. And one of the things that CDX does focus on is to like consolidate as many point solutions as we can into a single product, right? So uh, typically you mentioned that you have 1,000 eyes. I know I worked in CashPoint, so I am very well equipped to and understand how 1,000 eyes works. But like invariably what happens is you end up with different tools to monitor different aspects of your delivery chain, right? So something to monitor your devices, something for your Wi-Fi and network, something for your applications. So one of the things that we are trying to do is basically consolidate into a single solution where we bring in all these capability into a single application. So you don't have to worry about uh, looking into different applications and identify where exactly the problem is. You don't have to manually correlate data from different solutions. And of course, when an update happens, these are all mostly agent-based solutions. So you don't have to worry about going and updating that agent on every single thing. ZDX is built on a single platform. So anytime an update happens, there's just one thing to update, the ZCC client that sits on your desktop. So typically on Zscaler, on ZDX, as I mentioned, we bring in all this functionality. We sit on everybody's laptops or desktops and we run synthetic tests from there. So that basically brings you visibility into the application, how the employee experience is, how my network is, because we are running trace routes from the device up to the application or the server that you are monitoring. We have done integrations with some important tools like Teams, Zoom, and WebEx as well. So we bring in data using their APIs into ZDX. And also, whenever we detect that a Zoom meeting or a Teams meeting is happening, we start running a trace route to the server that the user is connected to. So you do get that network visibility also from the end user perspective as well. So again, it helps like our network operations detect and fix these issues faster because there's one single tool where you know where the problem is. We are telling you upfront where the issue is. And one of the biggest integrations or updates that we have done in the past year or so is to really bring in AI ML into the foreground, where we automatically detect issues that are happening and bubble them up to your network or to your dashboard so that you can be proactive enough to identify where the problems are happening, etc. And we do this on all three fronts, right? So your applications, your network, and devices, all three of them are being monitored. We are giving you insights into all three of them, including your device. So I think recently we rolled out insights into your processes, right? So what processes are running hot, how much CPU are they consuming, how much memory is it consuming too much, too little, etc. So all those insights are available to you. And of course, we have done an integration with ServiceNow as well. That's one of our primary, that's one of our primary integrations that we rely on, where we uh, we send out any alert webhooks that you have set up uh, on your ZDX client. They are delivered directly to ServiceNow. Any user creating an incident directly into ServiceNow we are able to use APIs and pull that information into ServiceNow. So you can get visibility within ServiceNow itself as to what's going on, where the problem is. You can run a few, like you can run some of our capabilities from ServiceNow itself, so the user or the support person doesn't have to log into ZDX, identify what the problem is, and then respond. The answers are available there. Now, on the side of telemetry,
just to
yeah,
Yeah.
kind of get some clarification there. So you're saying, excuse me, when we get the connection to ServiceNow, and let's say an incident comes into ServiceNow, you'll detect that the incident happened and add the ZDX information to that ticket automatically?
Yeah, so the incident part is still being worked on, but there are alerts and user tickets that get generated in ServiceNow, right? So we have alert webhooks that can be delivered to ServiceNow, and when an alert webhook sends or pushes an alert into ServiceNow, we identify based on the alert ID. We use that alert ID, use our APIs to pull in all the extra information that you need. So within ServiceNow itself, like our webhooks are very minimum in the sense like there's very little detail in that. We just give you a summary of what happened, like what triggered, what happened, what's the impact. You don't get the details. But with the APIs, we pull in all the details into ServiceNow, like what geography was impacted, how many users were impacted, what department was impacted, and things like those. Yeah.
Yeah, to clarify,
I'll
Matt,
show you
we
a
can
couple of
do-
screens on that as well.
Yeah, Matt, we can certainly do that, even if like they can't natively push it. Like we're already doing API calls to pull in troubleshooting information for other systems like Logic Monitor and things like that. We can do the same as long as the APIs are available, which to my understanding they are in Zscaler.
Yeah, so there's a couple of key things I think really to take away here. I think especially from a help desk kind of perspective, right? So I think one of the main challenges for a level one, really is kind of getting that ticket there to the right place and kind of understanding what's really going on. So I think this is really where ZDX kind of shines in the fact for that level one user that's taking in that call. A lot of the times, they're dependent on kind of a script or a couple of things that they do need to run through to gather up a little bit of information and stuff like that. So one of the keys about ZDX just at the higher level is how it does kind of bring everything together in that one single pane point of view, right? So it combines kind of the endpoint, metrics, the network metrics, the application metrics. It kind of shows us where that problem is. The early iterations of ZDX, you kind of had to go through there and look through the data and kind of figure that out. So, I mean, any of us that's kind of looked at pings and trace routes and stuff like that, there's actually an art to kind of interpreting the data and what it means. And there was a little bit of that, I think, at ZDX at first, especially for that level one, that just didn't know really how to tie all of those pieces together. So I think when he was pointing out just kind of the AI and the ML pieces to that, there's actually a little button right when a help desk would actually take that call and then type in the username of that user and bring up all of this information about that user, where they could actually analyze that user's score, and that that ML engine will actually go through there and take all of this data, and it'll tell that level one with like a 80% confidence or a 90% confidence that, hey, you've got a network issue and here's why and here's what it is. At that point, a level one would easily be able to take that and say, hey, let's get it over here to a network team. Hey, let's get it over there to an app team. Things like that start to become really accelerated, as well as being able to identify when it's not a Coke issue. Hey, this is a ServiceNow detection. We've had 70 users from this location call in, blah, blah, blah. So that way, kind of how to create that ticket and kind of go from there. So I think from that perspective, there's a lot of great things with ZDX for that level one. And where we're going here right now is just to kind of show that you probably don't want that secondary tool to have to go log into and work. So Wandon and team has done a great job of making a lot of this available to that level one through your ServiceNow platform. That way you don't have to kind of go through there and navigate that secondary tool.
Right.
I think those are a couple of key things. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Bob. So I just brought up this slide over here. So there are three integrations that we are currently working on with the ServiceNow, and one of them which is already available. So when an alert, so we already have dynamic alerts in the sense that you don't have to go and set up alerts for different geographies to identify what's going on or where the problems are, because every geography has different access, their baselines vary. ZDX already does that for you, right? We maintain a baseline per user, per geography. So depending on where they are, we over a period of time, we will create a baseline, and then you can identify if they are going above or beyond the baseline and you need to generate an alert or not. So we call them dynamic alerts, but the idea is very simple. We know that every users in different geographies have a certain baseline to connect to a particular service, and when the service deteriorates from that baseline, an alert is generated or triggered. So when an alert is triggered, we basically there are two ways to get notifications from it. One is an alert webhook, the other is an email, simple email. But the alert webhook can be configured in a way where it sends it to your ServiceNow ticket. And once it ends up in ServiceNow, we use our ZDX APIs to augment that alert with more details. So you know exactly what's going on, where the problem is, what department, what user, etc. We even show you the top 100 users that were impacted. So you can pick a user, run like a diagnostics on that user to get even more further information. So that's one. Now, there are two other things that we are currently working on, and these things have not yet been integrated with ServiceNow yet, but that's where we are heading towards. So one is the incident dashboard. So this is something very new that is available on ZDX, where using AI and ML, we detect where incidents are happening in these from your device up to the application. So anywhere an incident happens, we are able to identify and show that to you in a dashboard. So that way you can see what's going on, what's the impact, how many users were impacted, what locations were impacted, etc., and then act upon it. We are working on webhooks and APIs for this as well, which will start getting into ServiceNow as well. The third one is really for the end user who is either working from home or remotely, or basically who are not in the office, right? And we have seen it gets extremely difficult for the IT department to troubleshoot somebody's home Wi-Fi network, right? So what we do here is because we sit on everybody's desktop, the moment we detect things like low Wi-Fi, high CPU usage, high memory usage, we simply send the end user a notification saying that, hey, we detected a low Wi-Fi signal. You're doing either you're away from your router, you moved away from your router, or if that's not the case, maybe restarting your computer or your router might fix this problem. So we are telling the user upfront saying how to fix these things instead of them going and creating a ticket in your ticketing system to get some help, right? So those are the two levels of thing, three levels of management that we are trying to do, where we try to reduce as much as ticketing as possible. We want to increase our MTTR, so the moment we detect something, you have the details. One of the other things that we are
Quick question
sorry,
before you move on.
before I go into this. Yeah.
On the ServiceNow integrations, are you guys looking out at like an out of the box connector that would help with not just this alerting piece of it, but also like discovery of app connectors, service mapping? So it's more of a native integration versus it all being done through webhooks and API calls.
We do not like the kind of CMDB type of direction which you're asking for, like or the app connectors there and all.
Yeah.
We don't do that, but within ServiceNow integration, I mean, if you're doing a troubleshooting and if an app connector or a private service edge or a broker is there in the path, you will see that as a part of result of deep tracing and all. So to answer the question, no, we don't. That's not the goal of this plugin. The goal of the plugin which we have or the integration which we have is to enable admins and help desk to troubleshoot faster and enrich the ticket and enrich the incident with end user data.
Yeah, no, like I totally get it. And most companies start off with webhooks and API calls, and then at some point, because of all the different use cases, move into more of a native integration through a connector, a ServiceNow connector. So Bob, if that's not on your list of requests, I would put Coke down
Gotcha.
for a more native integration through an out of the box kind of ServiceNow connector.
Got it.
The other question that I had is more around what have you seen customers doing? Like, is this like an all or nothing, like all of your users get it, or other customers looking at it like, hey, let's just hit the majority of like 80% of our customer base will have ZDX deployed on it, another 20%, it's okay that they don't. Kind of what are you seeing in the market there from an adoption of ZDX?
So,
Adoption of ZD. Yeah, go ahead, Vikas.
so basically, from an adoption perspective, Dan, you hit a very good question. Comes out more frequently than you'd imagine. So ZDX, basically, like from an end, we are an end user experience monitoring. We are not a point in time troubleshooting tool.
Yep.
If you, and the other way I think our management likes to look at it is like there are tools which are looking at your network, and your applications from a lot of time from a vantage point perspective. Like, okay, let's look at the app from here or look at the app from the branch location. Our focus right now is to look at from the end user perspective. So long and short is when the customers deploy, they deploy it for, all of their user base. Because if that 20% of the user which you left out, if they are having a problem or an issue, you won't be able to, so like, okay, let's now install ZDX on them or enable ZDX for them and try to find out what happened. So the large customers who have deployed ZDX, they deployed for their entire fleet.
Correct.
Okay, so this is really leaning into kind of the proactive side of things, trending and monitoring over time of your entire customer base is what I'm hearing from the Zscaler team.
Absolutely. Yeah, continuous key monitoring.
Yes.
Any other question, Darren? Great questions, by the way.
No, I did have another question, but I think you guys already answered it. It was more around like where my mind's at is like what, like, do you give anything up, right? Like, does this replace anything in your environment? Kind of the three buckets of observability that I've been looking at from like an AI ops perspective is the user experience, infrastructure monitoring, and application monitoring.
Yeah.
I think really to get started, you only need 2 of 3. And if that's the case, then which one don't I need to get started?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think from that perspective, ZDX right now is an employee experience monitoring tool. I don't think we are going to go in the APM space at all, but we are working on a solution that brings you the infrastructure monitoring piece as well. So basically something similar to Thousand Eyes or Catch Points of the world, right? So what that will allow you to do is instead of monitoring it from employees, machines, desktops, or laptops, we will give you vantage points out there. So Zscaler has about 150 data centers across the globe. Every data center is connected to at least 5 or 6 of the top ISP providers in that region. So we will have vantage points in these 150 locations. You can target these vantage points and run your tests 24/7 to monitor your infrastructure. So basically, we are looking at circuit monitoring and all that. You can even do SLA monitoring from there. So one of the biggest requirements for SLAs is you need a static location, run your probes from there 24/7, and then look at the SLAs on a monthly basis, and then take them to your vendor, saying that, look, this is what you promised, this is what we are seeing from a static vantage point. So those are the 2 use cases initially that we are working on right now. I think the tentative timelines for those are like early July for a GA that we are looking at. And then later on, we probably are going down the route where you will have a branch connector equipped with this CDX where you can deploy it in your infrastructure and then run probes from there, or deploy it in your data center and then run probes from there. So those are the two pieces that we are currently focused on. I think from my perspective, APM is like very well established thing that we don't want to get into, but we will provide you integration with most of the APM tools. Generally, open telemetry is our go-to strategy first. So integrate with open telemetry, any tool that you use that
When are
uses
you
open
doing that?
telemetry. I think
When are you doing that?
that's probably going to be a little later, not immediately.
You can't say
But
things like
that's
that
the
and get me all
whole
excited
idea.
and then be like, oh, it's like 5 years from now.
I know I could see your reaction when I said open telemetry. But the idea is like open telemetry has APIs. Like when you trigger a synthetic probe,
Yeah.
you can generate an open telemetry ID and say, hey, this is a synthetic probe. So if things go wrong, then you can directly associate it with an ID in open telemetry and say, okay, these are the two things that triggered. This is your synthetic data and this is your APM data. You can look at it side by side. The reason why I said a little later, because we are still working on the infrastructure piece of it, right? So once that goes out, then we will have enough tools to basically start looking into an open telemetry integration. So I don't want to rule it out saying that we are not going to do it. Like I said, I come from Catchpoint. I have that experience. We know how important APM is, especially when you have internal tools. If you have your own applications that you want to monitor, it's important to have that data and correlation.
So, last question, and I'll try and be quiet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Are traditional metrics even important anymore, or should we really be focused on service availability in our monitoring space, like CPU utilization, memory utilization, like bandwidth like is that even things that we should be monitoring anymore, or should we just be really focused on service availability and performance and the user experience?
So so there are two ways to see it, right? So when we say ZDX is an employee experience tool, it really is from, are my employees having any productivity issues? ZDX is very much focused on that. The infrastructure monitoring that we are currently working on that comes out is from what I like to call it is your customer experience tool, right? And that's where CPU monitoring and all those things doesn't matter, because we don't know what the customer's environment is. What matters to us is my customer having a problem reaching my digital assets, and where is it happening, or who is being impacted? And that's the reason why those 150 data centers become strategic, because if you have a large presence of customers in a certain part of the globe, test it from there and you will know what's going on for that end user.
So really, what I hear you saying in the message that we should be carrying to leaders is this: ZDX doesn't necessarily replace anything, right? Like it's not going to get rid of your application performance monitoring, and it's not going to get rid of your infrastructure monitoring. It is a better way
not
to
yet.
monitor the user experience and availability of services that the user would be accessing, right? So the thing that it could replace is something like Thousand Eyes.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Correct.
That's helpful.
Right. And then again, if you're using something like Microsoft Endpoint Analytics through Intune, which I think Jeremy potentially might be looking, I'm not sure if they're looking at. So if you're using some of those as well, it's a way to kind of bring that in to the ServiceNow through ZDX as well, right? So you can kind of integrate that visibility, bringing that around one space around that. I think NextThink, along those same lines, is another potential tool that you see out there often replaced by Zscaler if that's in use, around the organization as well. On the endpoint.
Brian, do you know if we're using that one? I know we experimented with it, but I don't think we moved forward with it.
No, not to my knowledge.
All right. So I know we had a lot of focus on this one on kind of showing, Brian a little bit on how, his users can kind of see this, kind of ingested through the lens of ServiceNow. So Wandan, maybe this would be a kind of a good point to pivot and just kind of start to the demo on kind of what that experience might look like. So just kind of thinking about it from, hey, his report or his level one has just taken a phone call. Hey, I'm so and so, and just kind of what that look and feel would be for his users.
Yeah. So I'll show you a scenario that our customer had, and then I'll hand it over to Vikas, who can log into our service now and show you what we look at. But this is one of our customers who uses ZDX for employee experience, and whenever like they recently had an outage where a customer complained about very slow access to applications, etc. So he created a ticket, and the ticket ended up in ServiceNow right here. Now, because we have an integration with ServiceNow, or this customer has ServiceNow and ZDX both integrated, the moment the user created a ticket, we were able to identify the user from their email and then pull in all the information from ZDX and show it up over here right there. So the support person basically went and said, okay, the user is complaining about OneDrive. Let me go and analyze the score, what's going on. And we found out that the device CPU was very high. And so the user shares this information, reroutes the ticket to the right team, saying that, hey, take a look at this. The user is complaining about high CPU usage. And so once the right person had this ticket, they go into ZDX and then they run a diagnostics, or what we call it, a deep trace. So they just run it for like 5-10 minutes, look at what's going on, and they notice that one of the exe was constantly pegged, and it was not the case before. They looked at that particular process across all their users and saw that there were a few users who were having similar issues. So about 120 devices were impacted where this one exe was constantly pegged. Rest everybody, no issues at all. And what ultimately ended up happening is they found out that there was a patch that basically got installed on the machine that caused this particular exe to be just constantly pegged. So they were able to isolate this issue, roll back that patch, and then everything went back to normal while they worked with Microsoft after escalating it with them, saying that, hey, this particular patch was having a problem with the CPU. So they, using their NDM, they just basically rolled back all those patches and were able to solve the problem. So again, not just alert, but even individual users' tickets when created in ServiceNow, you can access the ZDX information directly there, identify, run the diagnostics, identify what the root cause is, and then reroute the ticket to the right team in your organization. So that's what one of the scenarios I wanted to go over. I'll hand over to Vikas, who can show you how the integration looks like on ServiceNow. Vikas?
Yeah, absolutely. So let me go ahead and share my screen. All right, can everyone see my screen okay?
Yeah.
Awesome. So the integration from a ServiceNow perspective, it's very straightforward. So there is a plugin which is there in the App Store. Once you have downloaded that, you will see the ServiceNow, the Zscaler component, the Zscaler digital experience component show up under your ServiceNow menu, right? And basically when you click on setup, it is a process. It's basically a list of steps which guides you through do this, click here, configure the user, and it basically takes you through the step-by-step process of enabling that integration between ServiceNow and ZDX. On a high level, bird's eye view, there are users on the ServiceNow side, API users on the ServiceNow side, there are API users on the ZDX side. You configure them, you enable them on the board, enable them on both sides, allow some permissions, and we will see why. Certain permissions, in some cases read only, in some cases read write, and allow those permissions on the configured users, and that enables the two-way communication. Now, once you have
Real quick, because Dan, I just wanted to real quick, just on that connector conversation on my notes, is this really kind of what you're looking for as far as the integrated onboarding, or are you still looking for more in that connector? And if so, I'll hit you up on the back end and get some details on some more of like what you need out of it. But I just, instead of just API, like, hey, we're not just giving you like a key and saying, hey, build it all yourself. You are going in here through ServiceNow and kind of onboarding it. I just wanted to know if this was the integration you were looking for.
I think this is
Or
part
to
of
talk
it.
more about the connected.
Yeah,
What?
I think this is part of it, Bob.
Okay.
But we can certainly follow up and have a deeper conversation
Okay.
of what that of kind of how I'm thinking about it.
Sure. You were just really more worried about making sure you can go through the ServiceNow tool and kind of onboard through that tool is what you're really hinting on.
Um, that's part of it,
Okay.
right? Like
Okay.
that native
Yeah.
integration where like, so when you have a native integration and you're using a ServiceNow connector, like there's less work on the teams to build out API calls and
Gotcha.
scripts and things like that to go and get that information.
Got it.
With ServiceNow connectors, you can typically, it's just out of the box available.
Got it. Got it. Okay. I'll follow up on you for some details.
All right, yep, great point. And then in here, this is the main setup screen, to be honest. Like this is the meat of the entire setup process in here. So once you have all of the users defined, you point the service now to your ZDX cloud. You point it to the API URL on the ZDX side and the API keys on the ZDX side as well, right? So you define all of this. And once you are done, as and when there are incidents which happen in your ZDX environment, they triggered. They will show up in here as incidents. So basically, like you'll see all of these incidents showing up, which were some of them were launched, initiated today. And there are two types of incident which could happen in ServiceNow. One, which is generated by an alert, and second, which is a normal incident which one of your end user or customer creates, right? So these incidents which are raised by an alert in the ZDX would show up something like this. So you will have the incident details, the alert ID which triggered it, the alert criteria which triggered it. There are like priority and severity which you define in the alert itself on the ZDX side, which flows in here. And then something which is very interesting is the alert impact. So this alert, what was the impact of this alert on your user base? How many departments were impacted, their names, what were the geolocations which were impacted, includes road warrior information, and then what were the Zscaler locations which were impacted because of this specific incident. Now there is an impacted users tab, which basically lists all of the users in those geographic regions, Zscaler locations, which were impacted because of this incident. So all of those users are listed in here. You can click on this eye icon, which will take you directly to the end users page, and you can drill down further on what caused it and look for data in there. Now, this was the flow of when an alert is triggered from the ZDX side and an incident is automatically opened. The another flow is a user opening a ticket. So in this example, a user Linda is opening a ticket saying, I'm facing trouble with my internet, the applications are loading slow, and just reaches out to the service desk. Now, because of the integration which is already in place, and this user Linda already running the Zscaler digital experience module on her PC, we are able to pull out information about all of the monitored application for that user directly from ZDX using the API. So what we are seeing here is for her, every application, SharePoint, Outlook, you name it, most of them are showing poor performance. So as a service desk associate, if I would like to understand what's causing this and try to gather some basic information and ask the why engine, which Vandan referred to in his when he was going through the slides, the automated root cause analysis, I'll go and click on analyze score. And what it is doing is making an API call in the backend to ZDX and asking ZDX that what could have caused this red score, this score in the poor category. And when that call happens, the Y engine call, we are looking at the data in point where we initiated the query, the data before and after, when the score was not bad, and try to analyze those data points to try to correlate what caused this. Was it CPU? Was it an app issue? Was it a network issue? Was it a DNS issue? Multiple different factors. There are like 50 or 100 plus attributes which we look at, try to correlate this problem. And in here, we are like, okay, this problem was because of high DNS resolution. Now we can go into the user's page in ZDX and look for what were the DNS settings, what DNS was the user pointed to, and do their troubleshooting from there. So on the same note, I'll mention one of the large customer, 150,000 users deployed. I asked them when and why, when do you use ZDX? Their answer was, we use ZDX as the first point of troubleshooting when we are looking for an issue, irrespective of if it's an app issue, network issue, and ZDX is able to guide us in what direction to look at, right? Now, in the same workflow, let's say I would like to gather more details from the user's device. So this telemetry information is like every 5 minutes, but then I want to do a deep tracing, which is basically data gathered every 1 minute, launch a session, say, I want to trace route to a destination. I want to see if the user is able to reach out to the destination or not. I want to do an MTR test or a curl test, if you will. I'm just giving examples. Right from within the ServiceNow console, I can launch what's called a deep tracing session. And when you do that, you can define the user's name, the user's device. Would you like to get device level information like process, CPU, memory metrics, and then define an application. Like, okay, I would like to go and do a trace for a SharePoint online. And when you hit save, what it does, it's basically triggers and a root cause, or I'm sorry, a deep tracing, collection of metrics from the user's device without getting the user on the phone or a Zoom call. And when all of that information is collected, you get this link here that, okay, this deep trace collection was completed. You can click on this, and it will take you directly to the, to the ZDX admin console, where the results of those deep tracing sessions are saved. So basically, and then from there, you can look at the results of the deep tracing and see, what was causing the user's problem. I mean, the metrics from the user's device. So I'll take a quick pause. Any questions for what I've covered so far? All right. So this is what the result of the deep tracing session looks like. If you see, the data granularity is every 1 minute. And then we have the entire cloud path information for the user. And then since we did not select device probing, we do not have that information collected in here. Yep, that's pretty much it from an integration perspective. One of the other customers who I worked with, they have like a MoogSoft component in the middle. So they try to correlate other information which is coming in from other tools what they have. And then it goes via MoogSoft. And after that, MoogSoft opens an incident within the ZDX, I'm sorry, in your ServiceNow environment, with all of that correlated information which they have collected. But again, that needs some custom integration going on the customer side. All right. Anything else, team, you'd like me to cover?
I don't
No.
think so on my side. I don't know, Brandon or Brian, if you had any questions or comments.
Maybe a question as you're doing the I think it was deep trace there. Is that something that just runs continuously thereafter, or is that something you're turning on and off for troubleshooting, or a certain period of time that continues to?
So when you define a deep tracing session, I'll show you directly in the ZDX console. So when you define a deep tracing session, you define it for a duration. So
Okay.
yeah, so it will basically be like, okay, I want to run this deep tracing session for 5 minutes versus 15 minutes versus 30 minutes. I generally run it for say 5 or 15. Anything more than that, I haven't seen a need for doing that, but you can define that time duration. And that deep tracing also has options for doing, say, bandwidth testing for that user. So when your user's traffic is going through, say, ZIA or ZPA, the traditional monitoring tools, which are only network focused, they would not be able to see the entire cloud path for that user's traffic, right? So deep tracing or ZDX Pro by itself, it is able to show you the entire traffic path. Let's say you are doing a normal trace route from the user's machine. All you will see is up until the ZIA. Same thing with SolarWinds or whatever network monitoring tools you would look at. You'll see the network path only up until ZIA, and after that, the application access or the health metrics will not be visible. Now, coming back to deep tracing, you can do a deep tracing, what I showed. You can do a bandwidth test. If you need, you can also initiate a remote packet capture on the user's device without any user intervention required. And you can define like filters and I want to only capture ICMP and all that information in here. So packet capture filter, the interface you'd like to collect to. And once that is done, you have to ask the user to send that packet capture file back to you, back to the admin.
Brian, yes, there's a lot of things I think that we can kind of poke in here and kind of show you, I think, on how the team, might use this. I know it's kind of a first, introduction to it and a lot to take in all at once, but just kind of getting your temperature on just kind of initial thoughts if you think this is something worth kind of looking into a little bit more from that perspective of that level 1, level 2 user. Would certainly like to spend a little bit more time with you perhaps and kind of walk through maybe a couple of scenarios that come to mind now that you've seen this a little bit, maybe just kind of further look into what it might even take to hook this in and just kind of get a little taste of what it would look like. This is actively running in the Coke environment today. So this ZDX dashboard, we've got about 40 to 50,000 users, I think, that have this deployed within the Coke environment that we can start kind of playing around with and kind of seeing what that would look like. So just thought I'd get your take and see if that's something that you want to further explore a little bit or where you might want to go from here.
Yeah, I think that'd be a good idea. I'd like to get some of the folks a little bit closer to the work, maybe involved in it and get their thoughts, not just from a level 1, but from a level 2 perspective as well.
Definitely,
so I think that would be valuable to walk through some of those scenarios. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. Well, we'll definitely we'll reach out. Elliot and I will kind of work with you and with Bill and everybody to try to see if we can't find a follow-up session to kind of work a little bit and follow up some more of those little those direct use cases from that perspective as well. So
that'd be great.
Elliot, I know we're right up to the hour. So anything else real quick before we call this one today?
Yeah, so me specifically?
Yeah, I didn't know if you had anything real quick, Bill.
No, I think that's a good takeaway. I was just going to open it up to Bill, Dan, Matt, anybody else. Anything before we go?
I just wanted to ask if there was any need for a follow-up. I felt like this was a really great session. I'm glad we recorded it. So Brian, definitely share this with your team. But I don't have any questions.
I think from the follow-up, we're going to follow up with Brian and just kind of explore a few more of those kind of very specific use cases to the level 1 and the level 2 teams, I think, from his side.
Yeah, Matt, I know this is kind of your first time seeing it. We didn't really dig deep into the application portion. Did you want to set some time to
Yeah.
go deeper?
I think what I'm curious about, and I heard you mention this, you said something much earlier on that we can't have it all be soft, right? When it comes to figuring out how we might value something like this. And so I'm curious to understand more about how you've seen customers approach quantifying the value of a solution like this versus alternatives.
Yeah, we actually back in July did a business value assessment with this, so we can revisit that as well.
Yeah, if you've got some sort of document that was produced as a part of that, I mean, feel free to send it my way. I'm super curious.
Yeah, Matt, that was the one I had mentioned to you and I haven't dredged it up. But yeah, Elliot, if you can just provide that to him, then I don't have to. Thank you.
Sure, happy to. Okay, all. Well, we're at the hour. I really appreciate everybody's time. Brian, we'll follow back up with you. And then if anybody else needs anything, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Thank you, guys.
Appreciate it.
All right, all.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Have a good day, everybody.